Second week of our sermon series on the 5 practices of fruitful congregations. Congregations that are doing excellence in ministry. And last week we talked about the importance of passionate worship. This week we're going to be talking about something quite different. We're going to be talking about radical hospitality. And so as we prepare to do that, let us pray. O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Fred Craddock was a great Presbyterian preaching professor and preacher. And one of his books is called Craddock Stories, and he just tells little short stories. They're almost parables, and I love the way, much like Jesus, he really doesn't interpret them for us. He just lays it out there for us, and I want to share one of those stories today. He said when he was in seminary, he was sent to serve a little church in the hills of Tennessee. Wasn't yet married, and he was serving this little white church in the hills, very close to where they developed the Oak Ridge Atomic Power Station. And so he was there, and he was serving this wonderful congregation, and he said, you'd go in, and it was this beautiful little sanctuary, and there was a chimney that was always decorated, and there were these pews that were hand-hewn poplar, and they'd been polished and shined, and people would sit at them. And then there was an organ, and it was one of those that someone had to pump the air into it while the organist played it, and he said she played it as well and as slowly as anybody. And he said, but it was this great little community, but all of a sudden this little community began to swell with people as they began to develop Oak Ridge, and all kinds of people moved in, and they moved in trailers, and they moved in tents, and anything they could. They rented every house and every valley and every dell, and the whole community began to swell with people. He said it was an amazing transformation. And so one Sunday after church, he asked the people to stay and have a short meeting. And as they were having the meeting, he said, I really think we need to have an invitational campaign. We need to go out to these people and invite them to come and to be a part of our church. And he said, somebody spoke up and they said, I don't know if they'd fit in here. And someone else said, well, they're only going to be here temporary. Why should we spend all of that time? They won't be staying long. Another person said they're not like us. And so finally they postponed any decision until the next week. Churches are good at that, you know. And we postponed any decision until the next week. And so the next week the worship was over, and they called the meeting, and the meeting started. And before Pastor Craddock could say a word, one person said, I move that you have to own property in this county to come to this church. Someone else said, I second it, and it passed. And that was the end of the vote. Craddock said that years and years later, he was traveling with his wife, Nettie, and they were in that area, and he said, I wanted to show her this perfect little white church that was there in the country. And he said, we had a little trouble finding it because the interstate highway had went through and all kinds, but they found the highway, and then they found the county road, and then they found the gravel road, and lo and behold, there it was, as white and shining and beautiful as ever, sitting there. And as they began to pull into the parking lot, they noticed it was crowded. There were motorcycles, and there were trucks, and there were cars, and then they noticed something else. There was a big neon sign, and it said, all you can eat barbecue. And he said they went inside the church, and he said the organ was still there, and it was pushed back in the corner. And some of the pews were still there, and they were slid along the walls so people could sit when they were waiting for a table. And the sanctuary was full of plastic and aluminum tables and chairs. And there was pork, and there was chicken, and there were ribs of all kinds. And then, kind of reflecting biblically, he said he looked around at the people, and there were Samaritans, and there were Medes, and there were Edomites, all kinds of people. And he said, and then I said to my wife, Nettie, it's a good thing this still isn't a church, because none of these people would be welcome here. Radical hospitality. Excellent churches welcome people. Excellent churches welcome all kinds of people. They practice fruitful ministry, and I know we're already doing some of that here. But I want to say something to you, and I hope it doesn't offend you, or maybe I hope it does offend you. But one of the things we say often is, and I've heard this here, we're a friendly church. I want to tell you what that usually means. It means we're friendly to the ones that are already here. That's why we stay. We have friends here. We develop relationships here. But what about those that are new? What about those that haven't walked in the door yet or walked in the door today for the first time? We are called as the people of God, as the example that Jesus set, to offer hospitality, but not just any hospitality, radical hospitality. So what is hospitality about? Hospitality is about becoming and inviting and welcoming people, not just welcoming them once they get here, but to go out to the highways and to the byways and to beat the bushes and to find people and invite them to come and be a part of who we are. It's about introducing them to Jesus. It's about making them be a part of us. It's about making them believe they belong here, that they are welcome here and we want them here. It's taking them and caring for them as an outsider and making them an insider. You see, that's what hospitality is about. It's about caring for people that are hurting. Hospitality is a sign. It's a visible sign. It's an act of the grace of God. It's one of the times in our ministries that we can participate with God, that we can act like Jesus, that we can invite all kinds and welcome all kinds of people, because that's what Jesus did. And that's what we're called to do. Regardless of what we have to offer, we offer it. One time I went to Tennessee on a mission trip with youth, and we worked putting on roofs of houses. And the one we worked on, it rained in the house when we got there. The people lived in the house, but it rained into the house. And they had no money, and one of the things that we did was we tried to do everything we could to make sure we got that roof done in 1 week. And we did. At the end of the week on Friday, the people that had nothing, and yet somehow she'd scraped together enough money and enough resources to make blueberry muffins for every kid there. And they understood what an act of hospitality that was someone that had nothing giving them even from their only things they had and sharing it with other people. That's hospitality. Paul reminds us in today's scriptures the importance of welcoming one another as Christ welcomed us. Christ opened the church for people of all ages, races, nations. We say that in liturgy, but it's not just something we say. It's something that's biblically true. It's something we're called to do. Are we that kind of a church? Are we open to everyone? It's a great question, because Christ's welcome is unconditional like God's love. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you've done. In fact, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's open to everyone with the love of God. It doesn't matter who you are in the community. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Doesn't matter what your status is. It doesn't even matter who your mama is. None of those things matter, because the church of Jesus Christ is open to all, and we are welcomed by Christ and invited into a relationship with Jesus. But you see, it's not just with Jesus. We're invited into a relationship with one another. And are we open in that relationship with one another, inviting people in? This is how we welcome the stranger. It's our call of our ministry. It's a call of who we are as Christians. It's an unconditional love and acceptance of everyone where they are. And by the way, that's the way Jesus did it. It's developing relationships. The church isn't a social organization. It's much deeper. It's much more. We are the church of Jesus. We are in fellowship. We're called to be with the lost, the hurt, the broken. We're called to offer peace and rest for all. That's the way Jesus welcomed us. Have we forgotten our brokenness? Have we forgotten our pain and our struggles? Are we welcoming and inviting everyone to be a part of us? We should be the most welcoming place on earth. I mean, people, there was a song, and you know it from a TV show if you're old enough. I always say that. And the song said, people, we want to go where everyone knows our name. You know what? We want to go where somebody knows our name, where somebody can call us by name and welcome us into fellowship. You see, all churches, they're friendly, they just don't do it well. I remember watching a movie at Christmas time, and it was this little church of probably 40 people, and this guy was coming through town, and he stopped and went to church on Sunday morning. And now, mind you, 40 people, small town, would you guess that everyone knew everyone? And the pastor stood in front of the church and like this, he goes, we have any visitors today? Would you stand up and introduce yourself? Oh, come on, stand up. We want to show you how welcoming we are. I thought, boy, that should be shown to every church. That's just the opposite of welcoming. I mean, most of us, I don't know about you, when I go to another church on vacation, I want to be anonymous. I don't want to be standing up, and I don't want to be waving. I said, occasionally somebody will ask me, well, where'd you like to sit? And I say, well, I usually sit up front. But they never let me do that. They're not as welcoming as I thought. But how welcoming are we? I mean, we need to do certain things, and some of those are going to happen, and they're going to happen quickly. Some of them already are happening. We need to have greeters that really know how to greet, that aren't just there to shake your hand, but make sure they're welcoming you in, and we're working on that. We are working on that. I see some great signs of that here every time I come. We need that welcome center, but we need to figure out where we can put it, where it's most located at, that's going to do the most good, and so most people can find it and use it. We need, and I'm going to know you're going to love this one, we need to wear name tags. You know, I got to tell you, I hate wearing name tags. I go to a conference, unless it's my meal ticket, it goes in my pocket. I understand, but when you're a visitor, when you're new, knowing the names of the people around you makes such a difference for you. The Sunday I was here for the first time, you surprised everyone and wore name tags. You remember that? Someone that had been coming about 8 months told me, sure glad we did that. Now I know the names of these people I've been talking to for 8 months. You see, we hadn't been as welcoming as we thought. We need to do more follow-up. We do some. We need to do more. There's a lot of things we need to do. But today I want to even take it a step further. Excellent congregations don't just offer hospitality. They offer radical hospitality. Radical means root. It means source. It means ingraining our hospitality in the depths of our spirit and who we are. It means going out of our way to welcome newcomers. It's not just at the front door, it's in every room in the church. It's everywhere we are. It's when we go into fellowship hall, and if we see somebody we don't know, say, sit down with me. Have a half donut with me. Have a cup of coffee with me. You see, that's what it means. That's what it's about. You see, it's been said many times, and I never really know who to give this quote to. I know Emil Brunner said it, but it's this quote that the church is the only organization that exists for the benefit of those who are not yet members. Is that the way you see our church? Do we exist for the benefit of those people out there? Because that's what we're called to do. That is the definition of the church. You know, I can remember at my last church when we began to offer the ministry for homeless women and let them sleep on our campus one night a week with some other churches sharing that responsibility. It created tensions. It created some struggles because these homeless women were around our children and our youth, and how might that rub off on them? But we figured it out. We persevered in understanding the importance of being in ministry to the others. We are reshaping our ministries to be radical here, to offer radical hospitality. A lot of you know, as we began to look and search for a new youth person, we reshaped the 2 jobs we had. And one of our jobs, we're going to have a director of connecting ministries, and their job will be to help us learn this kind of hospitality inside of us. Part of their job will make sure when you come and you're new that you'll be connected to other people. They'll find a small group for you, the choir, a Sunday school class, somewhere for you to connect. That'll be part of what they're doing. It's a radical way. It's a radical approach to doing things. But the church is about relationships. Relationships with Jesus and relationships with one another. We can never forget that's one of the primary basis of what we do. It's that relationship thing that is so important for us. The Alban Institute did a study on this years ago, and they discovered something very amazing, and then when you really look at it, not amazing at all. That when people begin to connect to a church, their likelihood of remaining and staying in the church and becoming a big part of the church is directly related to the number of friends they make in 6 months. And by friends, I don't mean people they're going to go on vacation with or even to dinner with, but people they can come in on Sunday morning and sit down and visit with and talk about the weather and the ball games and their kids. If you make 6 friends is all in 6 months, likelihood you'll remain at a church is 95%. If you make 1, likelihood is 95% you'll leave. You see the importance of opening our lives, opening and making room for other people. Henry Nouwen, in his book, The Wounded Healer, said that we could only have relationships with people to the space, directly to the space we could make for them in our lives. So are we making room for these new people in our lives? It's also said that people decide that when they're coming back to a church in the first 7 minutes of their visit. Do they meet you in the first 7 minutes? You're going to make sure they're coming back because you're so hospitable and loving and offering them the love of Christ? Or, and by the way, I joke about this, but, or do we offer them a gauntlet to go through on their way to the sanctuary? You notice how crowded our area is, which is wonderful when we know each other, right? Not so wonderful when you're a visitor. So do we welcome them and help them usher through until they're seated here among us? We want them to be a part of the community. But my experience in the church as a whole is we don't do a very good job of this. My best friend in the ministry, I was on vacation one Sunday and I went to his church and I got there a little early, and after visiting for a while I went down and sat in the second row about where Dick's sitting, and I was sitting there, and so about 2 minutes before the worship, a woman and her husband came in and walked in and stood right at the edge of the pew, and they stared at me for about 45 seconds. And after about 45 seconds, she looked at him and said, "Well, I guess we can sit somewhere else." And I guess they did. I don't care. I didn't move. But do you understand that is more often? How many of you have assigned seats? You may not want to raise your hand on that one. And how many of you, if someone else was sitting in your seat when you came in on Sunday morning, would ask them to move? I got somebody sitting in my seat on Sunday morning. I'm not even going to ask them to move. Stay there if they want to. I'll sit somewhere else. I'll go steal Tim's seat. I don't care. What do we do? How do we offer hospitality? It's a great thing. Do we have dress codes? I don't care what you wear. I don't care what you wear. I don't care if you wear jeans with holes in them. I don't care if you wear sweatshirts. It's not about what you wear. It's about where you are. And you come to meet Jesus. Do you have unexpected expectations you put upon our visitors, and you expect them to look and act and be some way in particular? As I said, I hate name tags, but I know their benefit. I think we're going to be training our ushers in something very unique over the next year. We're going to teach our ushers how to ush. Do you know what I mean by that? I mean, you remember what an usher's job used to be? If you went somewhere, they would direct you to your seats. And I've seen some great experiences on that. When I was at my first church out of seminary, we grew pretty rapidly, and it was a small church. And on Easter morning, we were jammed full. We had 2 services. We actually usually only had 1, but we put 2, and the first one was jammed. Second one was full. So my son came with a friend of his, and of course, being like about 22 or 3 at the time, he came late. And so there was a man who had been ushering, and he saw that the seats were all full, and he was ending his day. So my son and his friend came in, and so this man picked up a bulletin and went all the way up to the front of the congregation where his family was sitting. And so my son and his friend followed them, and then there was no place for them to sit because he really wasn't ushering them. He was getting his own seat. So we need that. When I was at Lafayette, I had the best usher I've ever seen in my life. Best usher. We should all be like this. His name was Chuck. And I always said Chuck did it because Chuck was the leading car salesman at Bob Rohrman Toyota for like 10 years in a row. And he treated people coming in the door at the church the same way he treated his customers. It was like he would take them and down the aisle. Would you like to sit here? Or would you like to sit here? You know, red car, blue car. You know, it was like, and he found them seats. That's how we should all act. That's how we should all act. We should all want to be salesmen of the month when it comes to welcoming new people to our congregation. The thing is, begin to focus that it's not about us. That's what radical hospitality helps us do. Begin to refocus. Now, I know it sounds like a lot of work, only because it is. And why should we even bother? Because, again, we're throwing that change word out there. We're going to have to change. And not only are they going to have to change, I might have to change, which is even worse. But we need to change because we're called to have a hospitality that requires us to focus on the outside. Radical hospitality is more than lip service and saying we're a friendly church and putting it on our logo or in our literature or on our web page. Inward focus leads to decline in attendance and membership and commitment, and eventually it leads to death. Outward focus leads to new life and connecting with people around us in the world. Why should we bother? Book of Hebrews says it this way: when you're entertaining strangers, you may be entertaining angels unaware. What a call upon our lives. We also get to know great people that we've never met before. And we also get to offer God's love to people that may never have experienced it. And so my question today is this: who are we keeping out? Who are we keeping away from our church through our actions or our attitudes? Who do you believe that is out of the reach of the love and transforming power of Jesus Christ? Who in our community shouldn't we have here? I asked the children that. Who shouldn't we have here because we don't feel they fit in? And yet God's love is for all, and we know that. We should never forget where Jesus spent his time. It wasn't very often at the temple. It was with the lost. It was with the sinners. In fact, Jesus said, you should leave the 99 and go find the one that's lost. And so who is outside the love that we should offer in this community? Is it people because they have a different race? Is it ages? Because when we bring young people in, you know what that means. They're going to want to change things. So is it age? Is it income? Is it sexuality? What is it that allows us to say, you don't belong here. We're not going to be hospitable to you? Years and years and years ago, there was a Christian song that had a wonderful line in it. And it said this: don't tell them Jesus loves them until you're ready to love them too. That's what it takes to open the doors of the church. We have to be ready to love them. And by truly opening the doors of our church with radical hospitality, we can prepare through Jesus to help people transform their lives. And whatever we do for the least of these, we do for Jesus. Who should we be inviting? Everybody, folks. Everybody. We should be known as the church in the community, and I think we might well be the only one that opens our doors to everybody. We want you here. We want you just as you are here, because Jesus will be with you. Jesus will transform your life. If something needs changed in your life, I can't change you. Anybody ever raise kids and try to change them? Jesus changes us. And Jesus will change those that need to be changed, even the ones that are already here. Whatever we do for the least of these, we do for you. There's a great story I'm going to close with today. I know most of you have ever heard it. I probably have heard it. Funny thing is, it's found in almost every religious tradition. Yeah, I found a version of it that was originally told by Confucius. I found ones that were told by rabbinic scholars for years. It doesn't really matter who told the story to start with, but you may have heard it. It's this image of heaven. And a man arrives at heaven and he said, I want to know, what the difference is between hell and heaven. So he said, well, I'll show you. And so he takes him into hell, and you see this wonderful table. It's laid out with a scrumptious banquet, all the food you could want in the world sitting there, but everybody's starving because they were all given 5-foot-long forks, and they couldn't get the food in their mouths. And he said, okay, well, take me to heaven. And he takes him to heaven. There's the exact same scene. There's this scrumptious table and all the food laid out, but everybody's eating to their fill. But the funny thing is, they all have 5-foot-long forks. The difference is they're feeding one another. You see, that's what Christianity is about. It's about feeding those that are hungering, whether it's hunger for food or for spiritual sustenance, for welcome, for meeting Jesus for the first time, whatever it might be. That's what it's all about. One thing we must note today, for churches offering radical hospitality, the story is the same as the story of heaven and hell. We are called to feed one another, but not waiting till we get to heaven, but to do it now. Won't you help me open the doors of our church with a radical hospitality that will change lives, change our church, and help change the world? Thanks be to God for the opportunity. Amen.